Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon for the Lunch and Learn on Simplify, which is one of the four pillars of the Compass framework. Last week, we talked about the foundation of the operating model, which is all about leadership readiness, as well as trust, vulnerability-based trust, the five dysfunctions of a team, and a little bit about DISC in order to understand how to build vulnerability-based trust and ultimately to get through conflict in a positive way. We also talked about a decision discipline, is how everyone's able to make decisions and it doesn't all have to roll up to the top person in the organization, as well as mental fitness and change readiness. And those two kind of go together because anytime there's change going on, it depends upon how we're wired mentally to figure out how we work through that change. So there's a whole process for doing that. And really, the whole section of foundation is the outcome that we're looking for is a leadership team that's capable to actually move into the simplify stage. Today, we'll talk about simplify. There are two other areas of the model. Lead with clarity, aligning priorities and decision rights and accountability so execution becomes reliable. And then growing sustainably and how we move forward with market expansion and leveraging our differentiated value and grow profitably. So we'll talk about those two other areas in a different lunch and learn. Today, we're really just focused on simplify. Something I'm really fond of, and it's pretty cool, something that I learned to use only in the last maybe 10 years of my career, is the 80-20 model and really leveraging 80-20 front to back in the organization. And what that means, everything from strategy and looking at markets all the way through to daily activity, prioritization of what we have to get done, like using a Franklin planner, for instance. 80-20 is an amazing tool. And say 20% of our customers ultimately provide 80% of the value in the organization. Or 80% of our problems really kind of comes down to 20% of maybe the people. It's an interesting phenomenon. It was an Italian economist, Vilfredo Pareto, who was around at the turn of the century, 1848 to 1923, and he was tasked with taking a look at the distribution of land, actually, in Italy. And he realized that 20% of the people owned 80% of the land. And that started to reveal this universal pattern around things in life that fall into this 80-20 pattern, which is just about everything. And what we use 80-20 for is segmentation. And if we look at some of the examples that I have on the slide here, 20% of customers drive 80% of our profit. 20% of our products drive 80% of our revenues. We'll go in a little bit more detail on this in a short bit. 20% of our parts drive 80% of our revenue or our margin. 80-20 segmentation reveals the highest market value markets that are out there that we should go after to prioritize and scale. So there's a lot of uses of the simple 80-20 tool. Thinking about 80-20, how many of you are gardeners? Okay, I see a couple people saying, yeah. Well, not necessarily very successful at gardening, but you like to do it. Get your hands dirty a little bit. Okay, I enjoy gardening too, but I'm not necessarily all that good at it. And I think part of the reason I try to point my fingers at my kids because we kind of do the things that are on the left here. The kids like to have watermelon, they like to have pumpkins, they like to have squash, tomatoes, they even like to try and grow grapevines. So we got all this sort of stuff going on in our garden. And guess what? Nothing grows. We get a lot of weeds though, and that's really what this gardener looks like. He's pretty stressed out, almost looks a little bit like me, but he's pulling his hair out, right? He's kind of grumpy. And nothing's growing. You don't see any fruit or vegetables in that garden, but you see a lot of greenery. And then there's some business related terms in there around legacy products, might be an example of a garden, a work situation that is complex or full of weeds, pet projects. They're not maybe making the money that they should be making, but somebody in the organization who has power decided we should engineer and build something or go after a certain market if we're a service related industry and create new services. But they might be pet projects and they don't really provide the value, or they're not aligned to the capabilities of the organization. Low margin customers. So there might be some favorite customers that the sales force has out there that over time they've shrunk as far as the margins of the products or services that we provide to them. And then there's the after we've cleaned up the garden a little bit here and gone through the 80-20 process. And we really have a much more focused and intentional way of approaching the market, our customers, and we treat our less important customers differently than our best customers, as an example. We nurture the high value areas and we have sustainable simplicity. Now, what this talks about here in the garden, you can see there's more vegetables and fruits to get a happy gardener. All the weeds are pretty much gone, so you really know where you have to focus your efforts and your nutrition for the garden, where you have to water. Not everything looks like a weed. You can tell where the plants are, the things that you want to grow. And it also says, core customers are identified, high margin products are identified. And actually some people, when you think about the gardens that they have, they put boxes around the things they're trying to grow, right? And I think it's the same thing in business. We want to protect those things we're trying to grow. So we know that they're there, we can see them, but we can also provide the right types of nutrients and water and things like that are related to business. The right kind of talent, the best talent that we have, as an example. So that's just a slide around an example of weeding a garden and how you'll have a much more successful outcome and output when you do that. So this slide is all about a cycle of business development called the sigmoid curve, and I won't go over all aspects of the curve, but what I would say is, and where I work typically with businesses, they're in that growth phase of development, which means revenue is on the uprise, but they might also recognize that profitability is flattening. Operating income is kind of flattening out or going down. And that's always an indication to me where they might be on this life cycle of a business. Because what happens when you start to grow, if it's your own business, as an example, you're wearing many hats, and many times you don't realize that you maybe have to bring in other resources or outsource certain things in order to continue to grow the business. That's one thing. But also the founder's trap has to do with putting in new systems and investing in the business and things like that. And really coming back to where the ideal is. Who's the ideal client? And going through that process is not very different for a small business or a larger corporation as they go through the growth, through acquisition activity. Sometimes corporations go through and they acquire companies to grow. And what they're doing the whole time, they're creating a lot of complexity. Every time they bring in new people, new products, new services, new parts, it increases SKUs, it increases inventory and overhead and SG&A, as well as unit costs. And return on investments tend to take longer to get a return, and they go down. The capacity of leadership, you start to go back to that garden example, you see the leaders with their hair getting pulled out. So it's important during the growth phase of a business, as they're trying to continue to grow, to go through a process of 80-20 and really identify where the economic value is And that's what we're here today to talk about. This next slide is another example as a business grows and they go into new products, new customers, they take on new customers and new channels, new markets they might go into, new factories if they're manufacturing oriented, acquisition activity, as I mentioned earlier, they have new partners that they're working with. All of this creates complexity. And that's exactly what this simplify stage is designed to start to identify. We'll go into the details of simplify, but once you go through, this is the right side of this slide is what you get. You get focused and intentional growth. Core customers are identified. High value products are, and we put walls around them basically to make sure nothing interferes with them. We have new strategic channels that are important for us to develop and grow, and scalable capabilities in the organization. Our complexity actually goes down. Maybe our revenue even goes down. I was part of an organization that it was a large company that acquired, that really grew a lot, much more through acquisition than innovation and product, new products that it offered, but new products through acquisition activity. And over the years, it had actually acquired so much that it had a difficult time finding new acquisition targets. So it would, in order to increase revenue, it would go after more of these smaller acquisitions. And what did that do? Oh, every time it added more complexity. So what we went through was a scaling up of the smaller businesses and ultimately an identification of where the real economic value was in the marketplace, as well as we looked at our data internally and what products, what customers, what parts even had the most value to us that created the most operating income. And we found out also what some organizations forget to do during growth is really identify what is it that we're going to stop doing. So we really had a bucket full of things that were low value but highly complex, and they weren't aligned to what we're capable of doing. And that helped leadership define and make decisions as to where we should go. We also obviously had the AAs, and that's where we put our best talent. That's where we put our resources, our capital expenditures, because we really wanted to simplify and move forward quickly with those customers and their needs. Okay? So let's talk a little bit more about the detail of what simplification is in this model that I have. It's all about focusing on the essential few things that are important for growth in the organization. And when I say growth, I'm talking about margin growth as well as top line growth. Okay? So going through a process that identifies where the real economic truth is versus possibly, I think this product would be good for these customers. And that's what we might get from the sales force, or we might get from the engineering area of a company that is engineering based on inside out expertise, what they believe, versus what the pain points really are of the customer. Eliminating structural complexity, going through the entire process and looking at our org structure, how we go to market, and where we're putting our talent, and really going through a clean sheet process and just eliminating structural barriers. Establishing a disciplined decision process to make it easy for everyone in the organization to understand where we're going and how to make their own decisions, whether it's about hiring somebody. Is it someone that we're hiring that it's critical that what they're going to be working on is one of our AA opportunities? Or are we hiring someone because we need to improve an area of the company or product that might not currently be in the AA bucket, but we want to get it there. We believe it can get there. So it helps just make decisions overall and prepare the organization. This is the step as we get clear And we have clarity. It prepares the next phase of the Compass operating model, which is lead with clarity. So this slide is all about focusing on the essential few. And I'd like you to think about a customer. Let's say the organization has 100 customers. This first part with revealing economic truth is all about doing a profit quartile or a customer quartile. So look at those 100 customers. And if you break them out into quarters, you'll find out that 25% of those customers, based on the 80-20 rule, will create 80% of your profit. And then so on. The numbers go down. And ultimately, that red bucket, if you will, actually creates negative profitability for the organization. And a lot of complexity because it's the same amount of customers as the top that creates the 80 profitability. So this is where 80-20 comes to play. It's not just about the customers and about profitability. It's about the customers and revenue. It's about the market, the size of the market, and the opportunities within the market. And that's where segmenting strategic arenas has to do with 80-20, looking outside. But a lot of economic truth is about data on our products, our customers, our parts, our distribution, our supply chain, and we can do that in our HR function. We can do it functionally as well, and really look at all the things that HR has to do, which ones provide the most value. We take that information and we move into step 3, which is make leadership decisions based on, those are quads. And quads convert truth into strategy or where we should be playing as we move forward. So the AA quad is the upper left, and that in this case is high value contribution and low complexity. So if we're talking about customers and we take all the data from the quartiles that we've done, we could start to identify what the quads look like. And with AAs, we want to protect. Remember, we want to put the around the garden, the things that we want to grow, we want to put a wall and treat them differently. Those things that are high value, but their complexity is high, we want to apply simplification tools to those. So that's the next quadrant. And then those that are low value and low complexity, maybe we want to redesign. And ultimately, the things that are high complexity and low value, we want to say goodbye to those. Or move them out of the organization. Treat them certainly differently than the other quads. Or quadrants, I should say. All right. That is an example of focusing on the essential few and how we use data that's internally or market-based to come up with our decision matrix, our quadrant. I'd like you to also think about an example that I have here where in an organization where I was working, we actually had a product that was a little bit far away from what we were capable of building, but it was for an important customer. This is interesting. So the customer overall was an AA customer, but the product that we were using, that we were working for them, was a lower quad, lower level, high complexity, no value. We were losing money on this product. And we worked with this for a long time. What do you think? Who do you think we put on this to work on it? Some of our best people, some of our leaders that should have been, working on other things related to P&L, profit and loss, something bigger, some more strategy type work. They were working hands-on trying to figure out how to make this product for this AA customer. That went on for a while. And this is where the change management piece and the mental fitness comes into play. Needing to be able to say, this is not right. This is not a product that we need to be involved in. We're sending it out to get worked on. It comes back in. We have to do more work on it. We send it back out to get treated, and we have to handle it again and bring it back in. And ultimately, it never really met the specs of the customer. So it's doing all this work and it's not even making the customer happy. Well, what we ended up doing is talking to the customer, and we had several choices. We could have raised the price and outsourced it completely and made some margin off of that. We could have said, we're not going to do this anymore. And that's actually what we ended up doing. But by the time we got to that point, a lot of money was lost. So that's just another example where you have to be careful and use the quads and quartiles to help make good decisions. All right. So once we really understand where the economic value is, then we have to take a look at the structure and the organization and how we've designed ourselves around the essential few things that we want to focus on as an organization. So the first step is to take our 80-20 assessment and really look at it from how our structure is today. Because we want to simplify our work, our workflow and our structure, and ultimately build a clean sheet organization structure. Whether that's the entire leadership team, and a lot of times that might be a cross-functional type team, or it could be a functional team and how we go to market, like with sales, how we do it today and how we need to maybe add some resource or change the way we go to market and what that means to our structure. I'm showing here also a process improvement tool that I have with Compass Performance. It's called Analyze, Refine, and Commit. And that's an entire process and set of tools by itself. But it really is looking at how we go to market or how we get things done and taking a process apart and really looking where the non-value added activity is. Take out the non-value as much as we can and build a process that's streamlined. But that's what ARC is all about. Okay? Yeah, so we're all about simplification here around criteria, decision criteria. And the first one is, what is the value that what we're doing contributes to the organization? So that helps me make good decisions, right? Okay, the second step is the strategic fit. That really does take a look at where we want to grow. And here I have where we want to maintain and exit. So at a very high level, if the organization understands that, it helps with making decisions. The third piece is around complexity and cost, and how much complexity will be added to the organization by moving forward with whatever decision it is that we have to make, and ultimately, how long is it going to take to recognize value? So these are the 4 criteria that I've defined to assist managers in their organization if they don't have a process for doing this, moving forward after they've defined economic truth and looked at their structure. Again, and the last thing as we move towards clarity is to simplify everything that we've been talking about on one page if it's possible. This isn't something new, but it is actually a process that's talked about in scaling up, which is a process for gaining traction in an organization and moving forward with your plan. The BHAG is the big, hairy, audacious goal, and what that has to do with is it's motivational for the organization to define that. What do things look like in 5 to 10 years? Revenue, what's our organization, what kind of products are we going to be involved in? Where are we going with this company? Farther out. Then it gets a little bit closer, strategic intent. And that's really where the grow, maintain, and exit areas are defined. There's annual priorities that we're going to go after in order to grow the business. And in order to do that, we have also things that we're going to stop doing, and that's what fits into the exit. There's metrics for measuring, sort of a dashboard on a car. There's critical actions. There's core capabilities that we need to protect and make sure that we have as we move forward with our areas of growth opportunity. the core values are listed here. I get purpose and core values and strategic thrust. The core values are all about making decisions and who we are and doing it in line with who we are. Okay, so making sure that the organization has a one-page plan or script is like a symphony and a conductor. Without a conductor, you know, you're going to have some really good players, but they're not playing together. And that can be destructive to the organization and our ability to execute, which leads to the next phase of the Compass model, which is all about leadership clarity. Okay, I've covered a lot in the amount of time that we've been here. And I appreciate everybody, the chats that you've had here, and certainly any questions that you have. I am providing my QR here where you can schedule a call with me. And I'd look forward to having a conversation with you to talk about the model in more depth, but I also have some meetings that are roundtables that are coming up that are broken out different ways. Some are around P&L leaders, some are functional leaders, some in manufacturing, some in service. So if there's any kind of interest you have there, if you really wanted to delve deep into mental fitness, I have a process to do that. It's called Positive Intelligence. It's incredible. You can take the assessment. It doesn't cost a thing. And it's all yours. I don't even get to see it. But if you want to go deeper, we can have conversations about all of this, the 5 dysfunctions, DISC, whatever it is that you're so desire. I'm part of Focal Point Coaching. And Focal Point Coaching has over 200 coaches that have different expertise. My background originally was human resources and the military, of course. But many people have manufacturing, engineering, sales, different backgrounds and experiences that I have at my fingertips to assist you if in fact there's a need in your organization. So thank you for your time today and for some of the questions that we received and for spending time with me. Appreciate it. Have yourself a good rest of your day.